Is my PPT visible to all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
So we'll start with the term emphysema. As you know, this term emphysema, uh, the term emphysema comes from Greek for inflammation. The meaning is that it's a lung disease that involves damage to the air sacs or that is alveoli in the lungs. So it's a progressive disease. The primary causes are shortness of breathing due to over inflammation of alveoli. So it affects millions of tiny air sacs or alveoli in the lungs, which becomes inflamed and lose elasticity, causing the bronchioles to collapse. So the air is trapped in the air sacs, overstressed, and finally it is ruptured. So, how the emphysema is defined as the enlargement of the air spaces distal to the terminal bronchioles with destruction of their walls of the alveoli. କ୍ଲାସ୍ରେ ଅଛି ପଛରେ କରିବେ କ୍ଲାସ୍ରେ ଅଛି ହଷ୍ଟେଲ ଆସିଲେ ଆସିବ So the destruction of the walls of the alveoli. What are the causes? Mostly smoking cigarettes. Those who are very, chain smokers, inhaling toxics or any irritants. Old people who have lost that space. Weakened inflammation. Then weak immunity power, family members with the emphysema having genetic disorder, repeated LRTI, and alpha 1 antitrypsin deficiency also causes this emphysema. As the what is the pathology? As the alveoli are destroyed, the alveolar surface area in contact with the capillaries decreases. So it causes more of dead spaces. So no gas exchange takes place. That leads to hypoxia. In later stages, carbon dioxide elimination is disturbed and increase in CO2 tension in arterial blood, causing respiratory acidosis. So, respiratory acidosis that we have already discussed, that is decreased pulmonary blood flows, increased forcing of the right ventricle to maintain the BP in pulmonary artery. Due to etiological factor, as if we will go to the pathophysiology again, what is given in a nutshell: loss of elastic recoil of airway from breakdown of elastin by enzyme elastase, then damage of the lungs, collapse of respiratory bronchioles causing airway obstruction, walls of alveoli are destroyed, reduces the lung surfaces for gas exchange. Alveoli cannot deflate completely and difficult in exhalation also. That leads to trapping of old air and the alveoli unable to fill with fresh air. So that causes impairment of gas exchange and leads to hypoxemia. So this is what the pathophysiology of chronic bronchitis we had discussed here in last class, and emphysema. So tobacco smoking, air pollution causes in both a breakdown of elastin in connective tissue of lungs that leads to emphysema. In case of bronchitis, it continual bronchial irritation will be there due to tobacco smoking and inhalation of any irritant or toxins, and that will cause irritation and inflammation of the bronchioles that will lead to chronic bronchitis where it occurs bronchial edema, hypersecretion of mucus, and chronic cough and bronchospasm that leads to airway obstruction, then air trapping, and dyspnea, frequent infections, which leads to abnormal ventilation perfusion ratio, hypoxemia, hypoventilation, and cor pulmonale. Classification. This is centrilobular, the respiratory bronchiole, that is proximal and central part of the sinus is expanded. The distal sinus of our alveoli are unchanged. That occurs more commonly in the upper lobes. Panlobular, that means all lobes are entire respiratory sinus is involved from the respiratory bronchiole to alveoli. So, what are the diagnosis? Take the history, do the pulmonary function test, spirometry to find out airflow obstruction, ABG analysis, CT scan of the lungs, screening of alpha antitrypsin deficiency, then do the X-ray radiography, which will help you in the diagnosis. Then management can be medical management, surgical management, and nursing management. So in medical management, take measures for improving ventilation, bronchodilators like beta-2 antagonistic, albuterol, anticholinergic like ipratropium bromide, then methylxanthine, that is theophylline, aminophylline, corticosteroids, and oxygen administration. Remove bronchial secretions, so promote exercises, control complications, and improve general health. So these are O2 therapy, antibiotics, postural drainage are also advisory. Then surgical management, again bulectomy, then lung volume reduction surgery. Nursing management, that is assessment and physical examination, diagnosis, and intervention. So already we have discussed these. If you will get such diagnosis, nursing diagnosis, what intervention you will do: impaired gas exchange related to decreased ventilation and mucus plugs, ineffective airway clearance related to excessive secretion and ineffective coughing, anxiety, that how can you explore and explain the prognosis, diagnosis,
मैम स्लाइड
etc.
शो नहीं हो रहा है.
Pardon? हेलो,
स्लाइड नहीं है दिख रहा है मैम.
स्लाइड नहीं दिख रहा है.
पैथोफिजियोलॉजी की बात का स्लाइड नहीं है.
अच्छा, ओके ओके, जस्ट वेट. Now it's visible.
Yes मैम.
Okay, so we'll go to the. So we had already discussed if there will be anxiety in nursing diagnosis, what intervention you will do, how will you explore the.
मैडम फिर से स्लाइड क्लोज हो गया.
Pardon?
फिर से स्लाइड क्लोज हो गया.
Again, it's not visible.
Yes, not visible.
Oh, what's happening? Now visible?
No, no.
No. Now it's visible.
Yes, yes ma'am.
So we'll start. I'm not taking to the slide mode. I don't know what problem is having. So we'll continue the class with this. So when there will be anxiety, what will be the intervention? You just explore, ask the patient to encourage the patient to ask questions. Then you explore the what the previous knowledge the patient had, and you'd explain about the prognosis, diagnosis related to the disease condition. Then when there is active intolerance, when there is activity intolerance related to inadequate oxygenation and dyspnea, you have to administer oxygen. For dyspnea, you have to see for changing the position and all, and see that possible walk. I mean, change the position of the patient, give upright position so that the patient's ventilation will be better. Then give all comfortable measures to the patient. That all intervention you need to write under the diagnosis. Then related to disturbed sleep, you just assess the sleep pattern of the or sleep habit of the patient. see any external stimuli which is irritating to the patient, say about light or anything, or the noise, light, all these environmental factors you need to take into consideration. Then for dyspnea, again you have to promote the comfort of the patient. So when there is a risk for infection, that means infection has not occurred and you are expecting the patient may get risk, may get infection. So for that you restrict the visitors. In intervention you will write restrict the visitors to maintain all aseptic technique while doing the procedure, clean the environment of the patient, and do all the cleaning, dusting everything whatever it is required for the unit. Then you can reduce the infection, and all the uh, aseptic technique you will follow while doing the procedure. Then imbalance nutrition less than body requirement related to reduced appetite, decreased energy level, and dyspnea. Patient, if it is hyperventilation and a patient is intolerant or say history of vomiting is there or nauseatic feeling is there, then it's better to keep the patient under parenteral fluid. Then as per the patient tolerance, you have to think of the nutrition part, whether the patient will take any orally liquid diet or through nasogastric tube, that you have to decide seeing the condition. Next, respiratory complication can be respiratory insufficiency, respiratory failure, then pneumonia, pneumothorax, and pulmonary artery hypertension will be there. Next is self-management of COPD. You'll tell the patient to take medications regularly as prescribed. Then tell the patient to exercise regularly. And then at least 4 days out of the 7 days in a week. So the vaccination, whatever it is required, you have to give the patient. Like for pneumonia, the hip we are giving for the children. Then you have to give those vaccination as per the age and prescribed. Stay away from all
मैडम ये
infections.
सॉरी मैम स्लाइड शो नहीं हो रहा है टेक्निकल इश्यू है लगता है उधर
Just wait for a minute. I am just trying why it's happening repeatedly. Now it's visible?
नो मैम
No. Now it's visible?
यस मैम
Okay. So, we'll advise the patient to stay away from the infections and maintain good hygiene, stay away from the fumes, dust, etc. And tell them to quit smoking. Advise them to eat a regular balanced diet and to drink plenty of fresh water, that is 1.5 liter minimum per day.
मैडम स्लाइड
And
क्लोज हो
then
गया फिर से
tell them, हाँ अभी भी नहीं हो रहा है.
जी नहीं हो रहा
I don't think. There is a problem.
अब
Okay,
स्टार्ट
we
शेयरिंग
are going
करना
to
है
finish.
उसे,
Okay.
स्लाइड शेयरिंग का क्लिक करने ही वापस क्लोज हो जाती है स्लाइड।
अच्छा, तो वो कैसे होगा फिर? So I'll just we are finishing this emphysema, then we'll go to another slide. I think by that time it will be corrected. So
मैडम
tell,
आप विंडो खोल के भी स्लाइड स्लाइड पे क्लिक कर दीजिए, हो जाएगा उस शेयर
so
नहीं करना।
advise the patient to get a plenty of sleep. Where to do? Where to do?
ये स्लाइड शेयरिंग का क्लिक मत कीजिए, डायरेक्ट आप स्लाइड ओपन करके फिर नेक्स्ट स्लाइड टू स्लाइड पे क्लिक करने से हो जाएगा।
अच्छा, कल तो ये प्रॉब्लम नहीं हो रहा था, आज ही हो रहा है सब।
सिस्टम नहीं ले रहा है सर।
पता नहीं क्यों हो रहा है। Now it's visible.
नहीं मैम, आप शेयरिंग मत कीजिए, शेयरिंग करने से क्लोज हो रहा है आपका
तो
विंडो।
अभी क्या करेंगे फिर? मुझे तो
अब
नहीं
वो
मालूम।
वापस वो उस विंडो में लेके जाके फिर नेक्स्ट स्लाइड पे क्लिक कर दीजिए। शेयरिंग करने से आपका वो सिस्टम जो है कनेक्ट नहीं है शायद इंटरनेट से, तो स्लाइड शेयरिंग नहीं दे
इंटरनेट से तो कनेक्टेड है।
रहा। जो व्यू बार है मैडम, वो स्लाइड जो नेक्स्ट स्लाइड है उस स्लाइड पे क्लिक करने से अगला वाला स्लाइड हो जाएगा। स्लाइड शेयरिंग नहीं करने से चलेगा। स्लाइड शो होता है बिग विंडो में।
स्लाइड शो में डायरेक्ट हो जाएगा।
हाँ, स्लाइड शेयरिंग मत कीजिए, स्लाइड शो में कर दीजिए।
अच्छा, ठीक है। सो ये हुआ ना स्लाइड शो?
अभी तक ओपन हुआ नहीं है विंडो।
विंडो नहीं हुआ है मतलब आपको दिखता नहीं है?
अभी नहीं दिख रहा है।
हम्म, तो फिर प्रॉब्लम कुछ है। थोड़ा वेट करो, मैं किसी टेक्निकल पर्सन को बुला रही हूँ।
जी।
मैम प्रॉब्लम हो रहा है तो आप व्हाट्सएप में पीपीटी भेज दीजिए, हम वहाँ से देख लेंगे। आप पढ़ाइए।
सुबह से जଣା की तक कंप्यूटर। हेलो, हेलो। नहीं नव्हतील ना. Now it's visible. Hello. Hello.
मैम स्क्रीन का कास्टिंग का ऑप्शन आया है, आप स्क्रीन शॉट एनीवे की स्टार्ट कीजिए।
Now it's visible.
स्लाइड्स नहीं है, सिर्फ आपको ये शो माय स्क्रीन एनीवे आया है।
मैम आपका स्लाइड शो नहीं हो रहा है। मैम आपका स्लाइड शो नहीं हो रहा है।
Wait, I'm doing.
वो did
टू से जाना है ना मैम हमें, टू से जाना है ना हमें। गेट नंबर 2 से यही है ना। हाँ तो यहीं बैठ जाओ। हाँ कुछ खाएंगे क्या?
Interesting. स्लाइड आहे ना. स्लाइड कर पडेल स्लाइड कुछ मैडम ठीक थी स्लाइड ओपन करो स्लाइड Now it's visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Start with acute respiratory distress syndrome. So, what is acute respiratory distress syndrome? It is a life-threatening lung condition that prevents enough oxygen from getting into the blood. So, acute respiratory syndrome, all of us know, it's a very, serious condition where the fatal consequences can be more. ARDS is also referred with a variety terms like stiff lung, that means where the elasticity of the lung is lost. Then sock lung, that means the whole air sacs will be filled with the fluid. Then wet lung, the same. As the alveoli or the air sacs, when it is filled with the fluid, it's called the same thing. Then it can be called also post-traumatic lung, where the air sacs is extended and ruptured. Then it is also called adult respiratory distress syndrome or adult hyaline membrane disease, or also called capillary leak syndrome and congestive atelectasis. So the definition of exact definition of ARDS is ARDS is a sudden and progressive form of acute respiratory failure in which the alveolar capillary membrane becomes damaged and more permeable to intravascular fluid, resulting in severe dyspnea, hypoxemia, and diffuse pulmonary infiltrates. Then stages of edema formation in acute respiratory distress syndrome. So what happens? As you know, the gas exchange takes place through the capillary and the alveoli. So the normally um, the alveolus are filled with the air sacs. Air, and the alveoli gives the oxygen and receives the carbon dioxide from the capillary network. So that will cause the increased pulmonary capillary hydrostatic pressure causes increased lymphatic flow inside the, around the alveoli. So the fluid transfusion into the alveoli will occur. So what will be the etiology for ARDS? If there is a direct lung injury, that common causes like aspiration of gastric contents or other substances goes directly to the bronchioles and air sacs. Then, if there is a viral bacterial pneumonia, so these are all common causes. Less common causes can be chest trauma, embolism, it can be fat embolism, air embolism, amniotic fluid embolism. So, all of you know the fat embolism is very common among the old age people having a long bone fracture, inhalation of toxic substances near drowning, then O2 toxicity and radiation of pneumonitis. Then indirect lung injury, common causes like sepsis, severe traumatic injury. Less common causes can be acute pancreatitis and anaphylaxis. Then prolonged cardiopulmonary bypass surgery or DIC. DIC, when the own anticoagulants are absorbed and there will be bleeding inside the body. Then multiple blood transfusions, narcotic drug overdose like heroin overdose, non-pulmonary systemic diseases, severe head injury, shock, etc. And massive blood transfusion is the cause. So, what are the pathophysiology of ARDS? For any reason, if there is lung injury, it damages the type 2 alveolar cells, then that releases vasoactive substances. Damage type 2 alveolar cells where the surfactant is reduced, surfactant production, and decrease alveolar compliance and recoil, which leads to atelectasis, which leads to a hyaline membrane formation and lung compliance that will lead to impairment impairment of gas exchange. Then again, lung injury can release the vasoactive substances like serotonin, histamine, bradykinin. So that will lead to vascular narrowing and obstruction, which will lead to pulmonary hypertension, and that causes ARDS. Then again, release of vasoactive substances can lead to increased alveolo-capillary membrane permeability, which leads to outward migration of blood cells and fluid from capillaries, which leads to pulmonary edema, that leads to impairment in gas exchange. Finally, it causes the ARDS. Then release of vasoactive substances, serotonin, histamine, bradykinin is responsible for bronchoconstriction. So constricted bronchos will impair the gas exchange, which leads to ARDS. So what are the clinical manifestation of this ARDS? One is restlessness, dyspnea, low blood pressure, confusion, extreme tiredness, change in patient's behavior. Behavior includes mood swing, disorientation, and change in level of consciousness also. If pneumonia is causing ARDS, then client may have cough and fever. So these two are the diagnostic parameter you can see. Signs, other signs symptoms like severe difficulty in breathing. Patient may complain of labored breathing, then rapid breathing, shortness of breath will be there, tachycardia, cyanosis. You may check for blue skin, lips, blue lips, and nails also. Then thick sputum, not think, that is thick sputum will be there. Metabolic acidosis, abnormal breath sounds like crackles you can find when you will put a stethoscope for lung sounds. Then partial pressure of carbon dioxide with respiratory alkalosis. Then PaO2 will be there. History of how will reach in diagnostic, all the sign symptoms what we discussed, if you get that on final physical examination, auscultation reveals abnormal crackle sound, breath sound. Then the first test done is ABG, then all blood tests, chest x-ray, bronchoscopy, sputum culture and analysis, chest CT scan and echocardiogram. All these are diagnostic parameters you have to immediately uh, fulfill. Then common complications are nosocomial pneumonia, barotrauma, renal failure. Other complications are O2 toxicity will be there, stress ulcer, tracheal ulceration, blood clots leading to deep vein thrombosis and pulmonary embolism will occur. So what is thrombosis and embolism? These two terms means, can you write in chat box? I think all of you know that what is thrombosis and embolism. Thrombosis, the clot formation in any, I mean, blood vessel, and embolism when one clot dislodges from one area or one and it lodges into the major arteries, and the proximal area will be impaired with blood loss. That is called embolism. So persons with ARDS are hospitalized and require treatment in an intensive care unit. So all ARDS patient, they need ICU. No specific therapy for ARDS exists. So all supportive measures you have to give, like supplemental oxygen, mechanical respirator you have to provide, positioning changes, turn the patient from supine to prone. Another position is lateral rotation therapy. Then you have to give fluid therapy to the patient. So turning a patient to the prone area, this is what the typically they have shown. How will change the position of the patient, and this is what the device or special bed is used for lateral rotation therapy. When the patient is in debilitated condition, you can take the help of this type of bed. So under medical management, you have to see the medications. One is the antibiotic, anti-inflammatory drugs, and corticosteroids you have to provide. Then diuretics, drugs to raise blood pressure, anti-anxiety drugs you will give, muscle relaxants, and bronchodilators you have to provide. So these are all the medical management drugs you can provide to the ARDS patient. Corticosteroid like methylprednisolone, hydrocortisone you can give, antibiotics like ceftriaxone, vancomycin. Then beta-2 agonist you will give albuterol, salmeterol. Then surfactant replacement therapy as the surfactant reduced, that is Biractant and calfactant. All of you know that surfactant, what are they? Lecithin, sphingomyelin, all that. Then diuretics like furosemide, hydrochlorothiazide, and spironolactone. Then vasopressors like norepinephrine, epinephrine, vasopressin can be administered. Then ricurnium and becuronium, atracurium will be given. Then inhaled nitric oxide. Then prostacyclin will be given. So what will be the nursing diagnosis for ARDS? Ineffective breathing pattern, as the patient is very restless and dyspnea will be there. Ineffective breathing pattern related to decreased lung compliance, decreased energy as characterized by dyspnea, abnormal ABGs, cyanosis, and use of accessory muscles. So impaired gas exchange related to diffusion defect as characterized by hypoxia, that is restlessness, irritability, and fear of suffocation. Then hypercapnia, tachycardia, and cyanosis. So risk for decreased cardiac output related to positive pressure ventilation, ineffective protection related to positive pressure ventilation, that is decreased pulmonary compliance and increased secretion as characterized by crepitus, altered chest excursion, abnormal ABGs, and restlessness. Other nursing diagnosis. So what we'll do, we'll go one by one with the ineffective breathing pattern related to decreased lung compliance. So as you know, this condition requires a supportive, support for lung expansion. All that patient may be provided with the respirator or a ventilator. So impaired gas exchange, you have to take care of the patient. How the oxygen saturation, monitoring of ABG analysis, monitoring of pulse oximetry, all that you can use. Then risk for decreased cardiac output due to related to positive pressure ventilation. Under that intervention, you will take all the measures what the doctors prescribe and see that the patient is getting adequate oxygenation. That you have to see. Next is impaired physical mobility related to monitoring device. As the patient cannot move, here you have to only do the left lateral rotation or position changing, prone position, all that what it is shown. You have to give that, and for increasing the muscle strength and limited range of motion. So risk for impaired skin integrity, as the patient will lie down for a prolonged period, and there will be this is related to prolonged bed rest and prolonged intubation and immobility. So what you will do for the impaired skin integrity, you will put in the skin, the patient may get bed sore, so you will take all precautions for changing the position too early, and provide the water bed to the patient where it is possible, or air bed, and also do the range of motion exercise for the patient, so that, and use the stockings also to avoid the thrombosis. Then knowledge deficit related to health condition, new equipment and hospitalization, as characterized by increased frequency of questions posed by patient and significant others. So here, since the patient is in life-threatening condition, patient attendant and patient himself will be in a panic state, and knowing the diagnosis and prognosis. So you have to explain the prognosis of the patient, then give up day-to-day information to the patient attendants, and also clarify all the queries posed by the patient and the significant others who are attending to the patient, and give them truthful information always, day by day, related to their laboratory report, etc. So what is the, and also the treatment regimen. Next we will go to the condition pulmonary embolism. So before knowing to the pulmonary embolism, you should have a idea about the thrombus and what is embolus. Thrombus is a blood clot that forms on the wall of the blood vessel in the heart, or when blood platelets, protein, and cells stick together. A thrombus may block the flow of blood, may or may not. Embolus, or a blood clot, if it is small size, it may not, but if it is a large size, it may, as per, if it is aligned to the diameter of the lumen, it can close, block the blood vessel. So embolus is a blood clot that is part of thrombus, air bubble, or a piece of fatty deposit or other object also, which can be carried in the bloodstream and block the vessels. So one thrombus, a small clot can go from a small artery, can block the major artery. So where the impairment of rest of the part, distal part of that artery, the blood flow will be lost. So pulmonary embolism is a potential cardiovascular emergency where a embolus develops in a blood vessel elsewhere in the body, most commonly from the leg, and travels to an artery in the lung and forms an occlusion or blockage of that artery. So it's a pulmonary embolism when pulmonary artery, pulmonary artery is blocked due to some kind of thrombus or embolus. That is a clot or a air bubble. If it is blocked the pulmonary artery, then we will call it a pulmonary embolism. So pulmonary embolism refers to the obstruction of the pulmonary artery or one of its branches by a thrombus or embolus that originates somewhere in the venous system or in the right side of the heart. The embolus not only prevent the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide but also decrease the blood supply to the lung tissue itself. So by blocking that particular lumen of that artery, pulmonary artery, rest of the part of the lung tissue will be affected. They may not get the oxygen, or blood flow will be stopped. So the cells may die, or tissue may die. so potentially causing the lung tissue to die. So that part will be necrosed. So what are the causes and risk factors? If it is inherited, there will be protein C and S deficiency. Protein C and S are the anticoagulants and that prevent excess coagulation. Due to deficiency of these proteins, more coagulation present that leads to pulmonary embolism. Then antithrombin 3 deficiency, that is required to prevention of coagulation blood. Due to deficiency of these causes, excess coagulation will be there. So next is prothrombin gene mutation, where prothrombin is required for the coagulation of blood. Due to gene mutation, leads to excess blood coagulation, and that again lead to formation of thrombus and embolus, and pulmonary embolism can occur. Then DVT acquired, that is deep venous thrombosis, occurs due to decreased venous return and due to some causes like prolonged bed rest, or patient is traveling for an extended period, and then following any after surgery, if there will be or any disease condition which leads to prolonged bed rest, patient may develop DVT. So increased blood clotting potential, that is due to some medication also. This coagulation activity is increased due to some birth control pills like estrogen, then smoking, and smoking causes vasoconstriction which leads to thrombosis formation. Then polycythemia vera, where the RBC, I mean, polycythemia vera means that condition where RBCs are more than the normal. So that may clot in sometimes in the blood vessels. Then in case of cancer, pregnancy, recent surgery, obesity, trauma, long bone fracture. In pregnancy, certain condition like PIH and HELP syndrome, in that DIC may be a complication. So that will lead to this pulmonary embolism. Sir. So what happens due to etiological factor? Thrombus formation occurs, and from thrombus, the clot is freely movable, or that embolus develops and travels into the bloodstream in veins. Pulmonary emboli is stuck into the pulmonary circulation. Blood flow is affected to that area where it is obstructed, distal to that area. Then increased pressure in the pulmonary artery, there that will lead to inflammation at the site of embolus, and inflammation causes release of histamine, interleukins, and leukotrienes, that will lead to vasoconstriction of pulmonary artery branches. Pulmonary hypotension due to vasoconstriction, that will lead to decreased return of blood into the left atrium due to obstruction, which will lead to decreased cardiac output, lead to decreased blood pressure, or hypotension will be resulted, and that will lead to decreased tissue perfusion. So this is what the pictorial presentation, how the embolus gets locked to the pulmonary artery. So clinical manifestation, sudden onset of chest pain will be there, and pain is sharp, and pain worsen on deep breath. So when you get a chest pain, you have to identify whether the pain is due to gastritis, whether the pain is due to um, pulmonary embolism, whether the pain is due to ischemic heart disease, whether the pain is due to myocardial infarction. So all the features you have to. This is what we need to. I'll just suggest, if you have any library nearby, you can go through that book, Lippincott Manual. So in that you will show it is more of problem-based learning. For example, the patient came to you with the cough or dyspnea. So, what are the conditions where the dyspnea will happen, or the chest pain you take, for example? So, what all the condition there will be chest pain? In which condition? So, you have to explore all the conditions and associated signs symptoms you need to see for that particular problem. Then you will reach to the diagnosis that, oh yes, this chest pain is the patient is suffering from myocardial infection, or this patient is suffering from pulmonary embolism, or this patient is suffering from GERD. So that is what you have to do, the differential diagnosis starting with a problem. That's what it is called problem based learning. Then dyspnea will be there in pulmonary embolism, tachycardia will be there, hypotension will be there, syncope due to decreased blood supply to brain, then restlessness will be there, hypoxia, cyanosis, cough, hemoptysis, shock and death. So long ventilation and perfusion scan, if you'll see, you will get a picture like this. So it is done due to detect how well oxygen and blood are flowing to all the other areas of lungs. So first patient inhale a small amount of radioactive material while a special camera designed to detect the radioactive substance, that is called also BQ scan, substance that records air movement in lungs. Then a small amount of radioactive metal is injected into a vein via arm. Images taken after the injection show whether patient have a normal or diminished flow of blood into the lungs. That is venous Doppler scan. So this is again a Westermarck sign you will say with the chest X-ray, or Fisher's sign you will see. That is decreased vascularity in the peripheral lungs. You will see, you will suspect of this pulmonary embolism. Then enlargement of the central pulmonary artery you have to see. Then what are the medical management of this such condition? The best treatment of pulmonary embolism is prevention. Minimizing the risk of deep brain thrombosis is the key in preventing a fatal illness. So when the patient is bedridden, you have to give range of motion exercise to the lower limb so that the patient won't develop DVT. Then pulmonary embolism is treated with the medications and surgical procedures. The main goal is to stop the blood clots formation and its movement. Then come to the conservative therapy. Administer oxygen by mask or cannula to reduce hypoxia and dyspnea. In some situation, ET tube intubation can be given, and mechanical ventilator is required to deliver adequate oxygenation. Respiratory measures such as turning, coughing, deep breathing exercise are necessary to prevent the or to treat the atelectasis. Provide position to client and in semi-failures position. Then medications therapy, always give anticoagulants as you suspect there is a thrombus and embolus. So anticoagulants are the effective treatment to treat pulmonary embolism. So heparin and warfarin are the anticoagulants which are used as drug of choice. Heparin should be started immediately if not contraindicated. Warfarin is available in tablet form, so it can be given orally. It takes 2 to 3 days to start its action. So ideally, heparin should be given immediately. Then PT-INR is a test used in case of warfarin administration. The dose of warfarin should be adjusted by the value of prothrombin time. So thrombolytics, these are used to dissolve the thrombus, tissue plasminogen activators, then for example streptokinase and urokinase. Surgical management, pulmonary embolectomy. Embolectomy is the emergency surgical removal of emboli which are blocking the blood circulation, and it is done when thrombolysis fails. It is done as similar as pulmonary angiography by using a catheter, and the block will be removed through the catheter itself. Then inferior vena cava filter, an inferior vena cava IVC filter is a small cone-shaped filter device that is implanted in the inferior vena cava just below to the kidney. because the large vein leading from the lower body to the heart. The filter is designed to capture an emboli. It is done with a catheter that is inserted into a vein and the groin and through the blood vessel. So IVC filter is often recommended in a patient with a pulmonary embolism who cannot use anticoagulants because of recent surgery or a stroke caused by bleeding or significant bleeding from other areas of body. Nursing management. So first of all, assessment. Take nursing history with emphasis on onset and severity of dyspnea and nature of chest pain. Examine the patient's leg carefully. Assess for swelling of legs, duskiness, warmth, pain or pressure over gastrocnemius muscle, pain on dorsiflexion of the foot. That is positive Homan sign. I think all of you know what is the Homan sign, which indicates a thrombophlebitis as a source. And many a times in postnatal examination, we see the Homan sign positively, and that sort of will get an idea whether the mother is having thrombophlebitis or not. Then monitor respiratory rate, which may be accelerated out of proportion to degree of fever and tachycardia. Observe for inspiration to expiration. Then percusses for resonance, dullness and flatness, that is accumulation of fluid or air, that you will also check. Auscultate for a friction of rub, crackles, ronchi or any whistling sound or wheezing. Auscultate heart sound. Evaluate the result of PTT and PT test for patient on anticoagulant. This is how Hoffman sign you will test. In case of pulmonary embolism, in case of any thrombosis in the bedridden patients, and in pregnancy after postnatal, during postnatal period, you will just check this Hoffman sign to exclude the thrombophlebitis. So, what are the nursing diagnoses? Ineffective breathing pattern related to trapped emboli as evidenced by dyspnea. Then goal is to correct the breathing pattern. Then nursing intervention. What will do? Assess for the hypoxia, headache, restlessness, pallor, cyanosis and behavioral changes. Then monitor vital signs, obtain ECG and ABG values. Then provide Fowler's position to the client to relieve from dyspnea. Administer oxygen therapy to the client to treat hypoxemia. Prepare patient for assisted ventilator for emergency condition. Then next is ineffective tissue perfusion related to decreased blood circulation as evident by low blood pressure. So your nursing goal is to improve tissue perfusion. So what intervention you will do? Closely monitor for decreased blood pressure, tachycardia, cool and clammy skin. Maintain patient on bed rest to reduce oxygen demand. Position the patient to Durant position to trap the air emboli. Then administer IV fluids as prescribed. Then monitor urine output hourly because there may be reduced renal perfusion and decreased glomerular filtration. So next, nursing diagnosis can be acute pain related to congestion on the chest as evident by chest pain. So your aim is to relieve pain. So what intervention you will take? Watch patient for sign of discomfort and pain. Ascertain pain worsen with deep breathing and coughing. So give prescribed morphine to reduce oxygen demand. Then position the head of bed slightly elevated unless it is contraindicated by shock. So if it is a shock condition, you have to again head to do the bed head and head end of the bed will be lowered. And with chest splinted for deep breathing and coughing, then monitor for pain relief and sign of respiratory depression. Consider physician evaluation if pain is worsened. Then anxiety related to dyspnea, pain, and seriousness of condition as evident by facial expression. So the goal is to reduce anxiety. Then interventions all you will do: assess the level of anxiety, speak calmly and slowly, correct dyspnea and relieve discomfort by providing Fowler's position to client, then provide psychological support to the client, then listen to a patient concern because attentive listening relieves anxiety and reduce emotional distress. Do everything possible to enhance the patient's sense of control. Next is nursing diagnosis is risk for bleeding related to disease condition as evident by taking of anticoagulants and thrombolytics. So nursing goal is to reduce the risk of bleeding. So what will be the nursing intervention? Patient should wear a bracelet, necklace or similar alert tag at all time who are under treatment of anticoagulants. So educate the patient to use soft toothbrush to reduce the risk of bleeding while brushing. Save with an electrical razor rather than a blade. Then take care with when using scissors and knives. Avoid potentially harmful activities such as contact sports. Don't take aspirin and NSAIDs such as ibuprofen, Motrin, etc. while taking warfarin. What are the complications of pulmonary embolism? There will be cardiac arrest. So a sudden, sometimes temporary cessation of function of heart will be there and sudden death can occur. So there will be also shock, abnormal heart rhythm will be there, death of part of the lungs called pulmonary infarction may be there, pleural effusion, pulmonary hypertension and paradoxical embolism. So what are the preventive steps? The compression stockings, as I said, you have to give the stockings steadily that squeezes the legs, helping the venous return and helping veins and leg muscle move blood more efficiently. So while you are making the patient to wear stockings, it will help uh, the venous return. Adequate venous return and will reduce the thrombolysis or thrombus formation. So use of pneumatic compression. This is also a specialized, um, um, specially designed jackets you can give to patient or the thigh high or calf high coughs that you can specially give to such patients that automatically will inflate with a few air every few minutes to massage and squeeze the veins in legs and improve the blood flow. Then you encourage the patient to have physical activity. Moving as soon as possible after surgery can help prevent pulmonary embolism and hastens the recovery overall. Then drink up plenty of fluids. Water is the best liquid for preventing dehydration, which can contribute to the development of blood clots. And tell the patient to avoid alcohol, which contributes to the fluid loss. Then conclusion, pulmonary embolism is a common and under recognized serious medical problem. Early diagnosis and treatment is essential for good outcome. Pulmonary embolism can be easily prevented with blood thinner, compression stockings, and physical activity. Then coming to the intestinal obstruction. Intestinal obstruction. What is intestinal obstruction? Intestinal obstruction is a potentially serious condition in which the intestines are blocked. The blockage may be either partial or incomplete, occurring at one or more locations. Both the small intestine and large intestines, called the colon, can be affected. When a blockage occurs, food and drink cannot pass through the body. So obstructions are very serious in nature and need to be treated immediately. They may even require surgery. So by definition, intestinal obstruction is a partial or complete blockage of the bowel that results in the failure of the intestinal contents to pass through. So what are the types of intestinal obstruction? One is mechanical obstruction. Second, functional obstruction. So mechanical obstruction may be caused by an occlusion of the lumen of the intestinal tract from pressure on the intestinal walls, like for example intussusceptions, polypoid hernias and abscesses. Then functional obstruction, the intestinal musculature cannot propel the contents along the bowel. Examples are amyloidosis, muscular dystrophy, endocrine disorders such as diabetes mellitus, and or neurological disorders such as Parkinson's disease. So it is the functional obstruction means it is the obstruction related to the function of the intestine. So the musculature is not efficiently propelling the content of the bowel, content throughout the bowel. But mechanical obstruction can be related to hernia, can be related to abscess or intussusception or polypoid. So, what are the risk factors or etiological factors for intestinal obstruction? One is abdominal or pelvic surgery, which often causes adhesions, and the thin wall in which uh, one part of any organ will penetrate into that wall, that is called intestinal obstruction, that can cause obstruction. Then in case of Crohn's disease, cancer with abdomen, paralytic ileus, that is pseudo obstruction will be there, twisting of the intestine, that is volvulus, telescoping of the intestine, that is intussusception. Um, Volvulus, as you know, twisting of the intestine is volvulus, but telescoping means the proximal part will enter into the distal part. So the wall of the intestine is such a weakened, and that will the proximal part will get into the distal part. So that is called intussusception. Then diverticulitis, impacted fishes, narrowing the colon and accidents. So see the picture of normal colon and colon with Crohn's disease. So this is what intussusception means. The proximal part gets into the distal part. So the pathophysiology says blockage in the intestine will lead to impairment of the passage of material through the bowel. Then blockage results in distension of the proximal intestine. Necrosis and perforation of the bowel will be there. Activation of local and systemic inflammatory responses, and translocation of bacteria through the wall of the intestine. Next is the clinical features. The patient may complain of abdominal fullness, gas will be there, abdominal pain and cramping, breath odor, then constipation will be there, diarrhea, vomiting, diarrhea, constipation, fever, failure to pass stool in case of paralytic ileus, absence of flatus, then fatigue and joint pain. Bowel obstruction, this has been already shown. There may be mechanical blockage or paralytic ileus. Higher the obstruction, the quicker the symptoms will be there. So, may turn to the malodorous with fecal smell, uh, hypovolemia, the electrolytes will be reduced, then vomiting. There will be abdominal distension, constipation with failure to pass flatus. Then you can hear bowel sound, which is increased to silent, then high pitch at the first, then it goes to silent. So what are the diagnostic evaluation you will do? A thorough history and physical examination, do the abdominal x-rays and CT scans, then take the CBC, do the testing CBC, serum electrolyte amylase and blood urea nitrogen, then barium enema, sigmoidoscopy or colonoscopy. Then surgical management. If constricting bands or adhesions are found, they are cut and it may be necessary to reject the occluded bowel and to anastomose the remaining segments. Temporary colostomy is also done, and later when the patient is in better physical condition, a resection and anastomosis of the bowel may be performed. So this is the anatomy. You just review. This is how the transverse colon, ascending colon, descending colon, sigmoid colon, rectum and anus is shown. So complications can be dehydration, electrolyte imbalance, infection, jaundice. There will be perforation in the intestine and peritonitis. Sepsis will be there. So what are the nursing assessment for an intestinal obstruction case? Take a careful history to obtain information about current symptoms and previous disease manifestations. So nursing diagnosis will be acute pain related to abdominal distension and increased peristalsis. To relieve pain, goal is the relieving pain. So the intervention is assess the level of pain, location, intensity, duration, that is QRST, quality of the pain, region where the patient pain is occurring, is the sore type of severity. The next is the time, how long the pain is occurring. So then you'll provide comfortable position and promote restful environment to the patient. Administer analgesics as advised by the physician. So expected outcome will be pain will be reduced. Next is deficient fluid volume related to decrease in intestinal fluid absorption and loss of fluids secondary to vomiting. So the nursing goal is to maintain the fluid volume. So what is the intervention? Nursing intervention, monitor the patients for signs of dehydration and electrolyte imbalance. There will be strict intake output chart monitoring. Then fluids should be administered as ordered. The expected outcome will be fluid volume will be maintained. Third is imbalance nursing. Imbalance nutrition less than body requirements related to intestinal obstruction and vomiting. The goal is to maintain the nutritional status. So nursing intervention is nasogastric tube is inserted for feeding. Then provide liquid diet which is rich in protein and high caloric diet. Encourage the patient and assist in doing oral care. Monitor the intake output chart. Expected outcome will be nutrition status will be maintained. Then fourth diagnosis, nursing diagnosis is anxiety related to lack of knowledge about the disease process as evident by asking questions. So the nursing goal is reduce the anxiety level. So nursing intervention is assess the anxiety level of the patient, then explain about the disease condition at the level of their understanding, encourage uh, encourage to ventilate feelings and clear doubts if any, then provide psychological support. Expected outcome will be anxiety level will be reduced. So, what are the health education you will give for such patient? For sudden pain abdomen, advise to avoid carbonate beverages, avoid chewing gum and sucking candies, avoid drinking through straw or sipping surfaces of hot beverage. In case of irritable bowel syndrome, decrease emotional stress, increase dietary fiber, and advise to go for a health checkup. Then demonstrate the patient if there is required the stomach care, including wound cleaning if colostomy is done. Then a high standard of personal hygiene at home and environment sanitation. Next, we will go to the condition gastrointestinal bleeding. So, what is the definition of GI bleeding? Gastrointestinal bleeding or gastrointestinal hemorrhage describes every form of hemorrhage or loss of blood in the gastrointestinal tract from the pharynx to the rectum. So, we will discuss about upper GI bleeding. So, what is the definition of upper GI bleeding or UGI bleeding? Upper GI bleeding refers to the bleeding in the upper gastrointestinal tract, commonly defined as bleeding arising from the esophagus, stomach, or duodenum, part above the ligament of Treacher's. Next is causes. Causes of UGIB, that is esophageal causes. Esophageal causes can be esophageal varices, esophagitis, esophageal cancer, esophageal ulcer, then pylori based treatment. Causes of UGBI, there will be gastric ulcer, gastric cancer, gastritis, gastric varices, gastric antral vascular ectasia, then dilophoid lesions. All these are causes of UGBI. Then duodenal causes can be um, duodenal ulcers, then aortoenteric fistula, hematobiliary syndrome, then superior mesenteric injury, arterial injury, etc. So, what will be the pathophysiology of UGIB? If there is injury or stress or due to any drug involvement in the upper GI tract, that will lead to injury in mucosal layer. If untreated, unhealed injury grows towards the submucosal layer. Injury of the vessels going through this submucosal layer leads to bleeding, and the blood mixes with gastric juices and the content that comes out from the body, either vomiting or with stool. So blood loss can occur with the vomitus or with the stool can lead to anemia, palpitation, and hypovolemic shock. And if it is untreated, it can lead to death. Sign and symptoms of UGIB. So diagnostic studies of UGIB, there will be orthostatic, if there is a constant orthostatic hypotension, then decrease hemoglobin level, basic metabolic profile, BUN, then coagulation profile, endoscopy, nasogastric lavage, angiography, barium contrast study, CT scan, ultrasonography. Then there are to assess the GI bleeding, there are 3 classifications. Forest classifications, Ruckle score, Glasgow blood spot score. Forest you can write F4REEST, Forest classification. So this is what Forest classification. It is given acute hemorrhage or Forest first degree A, that is sporting hemorrhage. Forest 1B. Under acute hemorrhage, these two, degree A, degree B, that is oozing hemorrhage. Then signs of recent hemorrhage you can take to Forest second A, that is visible vessel. Then Forest second B, adherent clot will be there. Then Forest second C, the flat. Then pigmented hematine on ulcer base, it can be seen. Then lesions without active bleeding, uh, Forest 3, that is lesions without signs of recent hemorrhage or fibrin covered clean ulcer base. Similarly, Ruckle score has given, see the score, as the age is less, the score will be low, and as the age gradually increases, the score rate will be high. So in case of upper GI bleeding less than 60, if the age is less than 60, you give score 0. These are all parameters you will take: age, shock, comorbidity, diagnosis, evidence of bleeding, etc. Shock, if there is no shock due to bleeding, also gives score 0. Then if the comorbidity, not major comorbidity is with that patient, then give 0. Then diagnosis, Mallory's West tear, if it is there, gives score 0. Then evidence of bleeding, if not, no evidence of bleeding, give 0. If the patient is in 60 to 79 and give score 1. For age, the patient will get score 1. Pulse more than 100, tachycardia gives score 2. Then SBP, if it is more than 100, systolic blood pressure, it gives score 2. Sorry, gives score 1. A pulse, if it is more than 100, also gives score 1. Then there is no measurement for comorbidity in such individuals. Diagnosis, if all other diagnosis, as I read, if it is there, gastric ulcer, etc., you give score 1 to that. Then coming to the score 2, where you will give score 2 when the patient's age is more than 80 and systolic blood pressure is less than 100. Then there will be comorbidity like ISG, major morbidity, and chronic heart failure, so on. If it is there, then next is diagnosis. If the GI malignancy is also there, you give score 2. And evidence of bleeding, blood will be there, adherent clot you can find, and spotting vessels you can find. If it is there, then give score 2. Then score 3, when the all these features with comorbidity, renal failure, liver failure, metastatic cancer, etc. Then Glasgow blood spot score, when the blood urea is less than 8, 6.5 less than 8, then you can say score 2. Then it is 8 or less, blood urea will be 8, but less than 10, you give 3. Blood urea is 10, less than 25, give 4. Blood urea is more than 25, give score 6. Then HBG, that is per liter. We are saying per gram percentage. When it is gram per liter, deciliter, we are saying HB hemoglobin. But for liter, when you see, if it is 120 and less than 130, give score 1 in case of men. 100, if it is reached 100 and less than 120, give score 3 for men and 1 for women. Then if it is less than 100, give score 6 uh, per men and per women. Is both for men and women. Then systolic blood pressure, if it remains 100 to 199, give score 1. Then 90 to 99, give score 2. Less than 90, give score 3. Other markers like pulse more than 100 per minute, give 1. Melena gives score 1. Syncope gives score 1. Hepatic disease gives score 2. Cardiac failure gives score 2. Next is how we interpret the GBS. That is Glasgow Blackford score. In the validation group, scores of 6 or more were associated with greater than 50% risk of needing an intervention. Score is equal to 0 if the following are all present. Hemoglobin level more than 12.9 gram per deciliter in case of men, or less than 11.9 gram per deciliter in case of women. Systolic blood pressure more than 109 millimeter of mercury. Pulse less than 100 per minute. Blood urea nitrogen level less than 18.2 milligram per deciliter. No melena or syncope. No past or present liver disease or heart failure. So how will manage these cases? In acute phase, assess for airway, breathing and circulation. First, if not present any compromised, activate the rapid response team and restore the ABC first. ABC means airway, breathing and circulation. So fluid resuscitation, if the internal bleeding is there, fluid resuscitation by IV colloids or crystalloid transfusion. Maintenance of vital signs, hemodynamics monitoring can be needed. Blood transfusion depending on blood reports. Pain management, but analgesics should be used cautiously. Sedatives can be used, but after determining level of consciousness, do an endoscopy to rule out the actual problem. Treatment of varicose bleeding, fluid replacement, octreotide, vasopressin and nitroglycerin, endoscopic banding plus sclerotherapy, then with beta blockers and nitrates to stop rebleed, balloon tamponade with a Sengstaken Blackmore tube or Minnesota tube, then transjugular intrahepatic portosystemic shunt. If it is not recovered, bleeding is not checked by these drugs, you can give this transjugular intrahepatic shunt. You have to give tips, that is tips. So this is what the treatment of non-varicose bleeding. Indications of surgery, if there will be persistent hypotension, failure of medical treatment or endoscopic homeostasis, then coexisting condition, excuse me, then like perforation, obstruction or malignancy, then transfusion is required 4 units in 24 hours, and recurrent hospitalizations, if that is there, then you will go for surgical treatment. Surgery for UGIB, duodenal ulcer, are treated by under running with or without pyloroplasty. Gastric ulcer treated by underrunning, take a biopsy to exclude carcinoma. Then local excision or partial gastrectomy will be required. So what are the complications of UGIB treatment? Endoscopy, there will be aspiration, pneumonia and perforation. Complications from coagulation, laser treatment surgery, alias sepsis and wound. So these are all related to upper gastrointestinal bleeding. Then in next class we will go to the lower GI bleeding. We'll cover all the gastrointestinal disorder in the next class, and I think we'll extend one more class to teach you about the research and all, because small research activity will do in the supervised and self activity. So we'll go for that in the next class. In next class all the disorders will cover, and we'll extend one more class. We'll extend one more class for research to name the fundamentals of research. Okay. So thank you all for joining the session.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, on 4th, and for the next 4th is the last class, and we'll extend 2 more class. I'll talk to the regional center and we'll just inform you regarding the dates. Maybe it is on the 6th or 7th, both the days. I'll just inform you in the WhatsApp. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.